On July 16, 1945, one of the most influential events in history occurred. The birth of the atomic age began with the first successful test of the atom bomb. The first mushroom cloud of searing light stretched 40,000 feet into the air and generated the destructive power of more than 15,000 tons of TNT. Less than a month later, on August 9th, a nuclear device was dropped at 11:02 a.m., 1,650 feet above the city of Nagasaki. The explosion unleashed the equivalent force of 22,000 tons of TNT. The number killed is estimated at anywhere between 60,000 and 80,000. It was the final blow to Japan that truly ended the war.
May of 1945 saw the lights go on again. Once more the nation's capital was blazing in all its glory, and in cities throughout the nation the blackout was ended. Germany had surrendered, the war in Europe was over. There was still a war to be fought to a finish in the Pacific, but that couldn't dim the celebration that marked the fall of Hitler and the end of his dreams of world conquest. 3 months later, crowds gather in front of the White House, awaiting the announcement of Japan's surrender from President Harry S. Truman. It took 2 atomic bombs to bring Japan to her knees. But now Pearl Harbor was avenged, and the news triggered the greatest celebration the nation has ever known.
When the announcement went out that Japan had been the subject of one of the most powerful explosions in human history, not once, but twice, everyone had a different reaction to it. The United States of America celebrated its victory in the war that had claimed so many lives. But as things settled down, the true tragedy of what had occurred manifested itself in full view of the public.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
Countless intense emotions stirred together to create one of the most remembered artistic renaissances in history, other than the actual Renaissance, of course. The atomic age of pop culture had begun. You can tell a lot about a culture based on its fictional monsters. Werewolves are typically a response to human savagery. Zombies symbolize our fear of death or disease. Giants represent our fear of power. With the atomic age came a whole new fictional species of creatures from the human fear of nuclear devastation. This new fictional species of monster that graced the 1950s film landscape was very different from previous monsters. The more iconic monsters that filled Depression-era films like Dracula and King Kong, while always inhuman, also had a certain relatability to them. Dracula was charming, and you felt sorry for King Kong in the end. By the 1950s, filmmakers had switched from using the relatable, inhuman creatures of old to using living, natural disasters. The most iconic being Gojira, or Godzilla, as he was called in the West. The iconic film Gojira tells the story of a giant, ancient monster powered by nuclear radiation attacking Japan with atomic breath. Everything about Gojira was meant to symbolize the nuclear devastation felt after the bomb. Gojira's head was made to resemble a mushroom cloud, its skin designed to look like the scarring caused by the bomb's radiation. Gojira was a force of nature more than it was a monster, and it set the standard for the radioactive monsters to follow. Japan was not alone in the post-war atomic age artistic movement. As the Cold War started gaining speed, the threat of nuclear war began to grow. The United States of America began to express their feelings about the idea of nuclear holocaust, with many iconic creatures. One of the first being the giant ants in the 1954 film, Them.
In one moment of history making violence. Nature, mad, rampant, wrought its most awesome creation. For born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust were things so horrible, so terrifying, so hideous. There is no word to describe them.
The giant ants were created from nuclear tests and merciless killing machines. The ants served as both a metaphor for the dangers of nuclear weapons and as an allegory for the rising threat of communism. Communism and nuclear weapons came to define most of the most iconic monsters of the 1950s. The United States saw a clear and dangerous enemy in Soviet Russia, which left no room for sympathy or relatability.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. Is he strong? Listen, bud, he's got radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Outside the film landscape, the Marvel Comics publisher was creating a whole pantheon dedicated to the relieving of Cold War and atomic age anxiety, with characters who gained great power from radiation. But instead of going on rampages, these characters were heroic. Not only more complex, but heroic. Most of these characters had relatively simple origins. Normal, everyday people got exposed to intense levels of radiation and came out altered, and yet still very human. The Fantastic Four just wanted to explore and had no interest in destroying Tokyo. The Hulk occasionally fought the US military, but was not a one-dimensional killing machine. Spider-Man even stressed the responsibility that comes with power. Heroic characters empowered by the atomic age arrived in the form of Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and the Incredible Hulk. The threat of atomic war was starting to be seen as less of a threat to humanity. Instead, it was being seen as the only thing standing between America and the evils of the USSR. Even Japan's own symbol of nuclear devastation, Godzilla, was not safe from this shift in cultural thinking. The world had come to accept that nuclear weapons were here to stay. There was no getting the atomic genie, somebody please make that a thing, out of the bottle, so to speak. But now that the world had accepted the atomic age, a new morale started appearing through the film landscape. The lesson that the atomic age seems to have spat out repeatedly is that new technology is scary and dangerous. With every new age comes destruction in one form or another. Godzilla soon became Japan's anti-hero protector, defending the nation from other giant monsters. However, as time goes on, much like Godzilla and the Hulk started to mellow out and become more heroic, so too does technology. Nuclear reactors, while controversial, provide massive amounts of clean energy to people all over the world. Radiation is used to fight new monsters like cancer. The world still recognizes the danger of nuclear weapons, but we've come to accept their presence, and our pop culture has come to embody that as well. The vast majority of nuclear-age characters are either extinct or have become unstable forces for good. But that doesn't mean we forget their dangers and don't feel the responsibility that comes with destruction.